Welcome to A Veil of Crime, where we uncover the chilling stories hidden in the shadows of history. Tonight, we dive into the tragic and unforgettable case of Betty Broderick, a woman whose story is woven with betrayal, anger, obsession, and murder. This case shocked the nation in the late 1980s and continues to spark debate about love, divorce, and the limits of human emotion. Betty Broderick was born Elizabeth Ann Bashayla in 1947. She was the third of 6 children in a strict Catholic family in Eastchester, New York. From an early age, Betty was taught to aspire towards marriage and motherhood rather than be independent. In 1965, she met Daniel Broderick at the University of Notre Dame. Daniel, ambitious and charismatic, would go on to become a successful medical doctor and later even a lawyer after graduating from Harvard Law School. Betty and Dan married in 1969, and Betty quickly took on the role of the supportive wife, raising their children while Dan climbed the professional ladder. By the 1980s, Dan had become one of San Diego's most successful malpractice attorneys. Betty, meanwhile, felt increasingly sidelined and unappreciated. Tensions between the couple escalated when Dan hired Linda Kolkina, a former flight attendant, to be his legal assistant in 1982. Betty grew suspicious of an affair, and in time, her fears were confirmed. The betrayal would mark the beginning of Betty's unraveling. The divorce battle between Dan and Betty Broderick was one of the most bitter and publicized of its time. Dan moved in with Linda, and in 1989, he married her. Betty felt humiliated and also abandoned, claiming that Dan had used his legal expertise to strip her of money, dignity, and even her role as a mother. She left angry voicemails, vandalized property, and lashed out in desperation. Her emotional spiral was evident to friends and family, yet she remained consumed with rage toward her ex-husband and his new wife. On November 5, 1989, Betty entered Dan and Linda's home using a key that she had taken. She shot and killed both of them while they slept in their bed. Dan was 44 years old and Linda was just 28. The murder shocked the nation, not only because of the brutal act itself, but because Betty, once a suburban wife and mother, had transformed into a convicted killer. Betty Broderick's trial became a media sensation. Her first trial in 1990 ended in a hung jury, but her second trial in 1991 led to convictions for 2 counts of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 32 years to life in prison. The case drew divided opinions. Some viewed Betty as a cold-blooded killer, while others saw her as a woman pushed beyond her limits by systemic inequality, infidelity, and psychological abuse. This case has been retold in books, documentaries, and dramatizations, most notably in Dirty John, the Betty Broderick story. Even decades later, Betty's story continues to spark conversations about domestic strife, women's rights, and the devastating consequences of unchecked rage. This case reminds us of the destructive power of obsession, heartbreak, and revenge. Betty Broderick's story is both a tragedy and a cautionary tale about what can happen when love curdles into hatred. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows of history. Until next time, stay safe and remember, the past is never truly buried beneath the veil of crime.